Hi, I'm Clay Daniel with Clayborne LSAT. This video is a logical reasoning explainer having to do with technique or method of argument questions. Not the most common type on the LSAT, but definitely do pop up, and they are some of the more straightforward kinds of questions. The reason I say that is that they do bear the marks of argument questions. There is a conclusion, or in this case, really two conclusions, two parties speaking, although we're focusing on the second party more. But what it lacks is that sense that we need to find a flaw in the argument, that we need to kind of toss objections at the argument in ways that we need to do on critical questions like flaw and necessary assumption and weaken questions. Method of argument or technique questions are simpler. We need to find the choice that describes most effectively how the argument is happening. So the specific question we're looking at today is from test 73. You can find that on your Law Hub account. Let's go to test 73, section 2, number 14. Feel free to pause the video and find that so you have it in front of you. We won't look at the entire question, or we won't read it out loud out of respect for LSAC's copyright. So you do need to have it in front of you. And again, pause it at any point to read through this in its entirety, because I'm going to be picking out certain parts. Notice that the question stem itself is very short. It's simply the presence of the word by or responds by that tells us this is a technique question. How does the second party respond to the first? So of course we need to understand the first person's argument, the conclusion, and the reasons for it. A defense of space exploration programs for the sake of the research and the technology that come out of them. But then we're going to focus more on the second person, Winona, because the argument focuses more on her. How does she respond to Inez's argument? Well, we have the conclusion right away, a very strong statement, including the word absurd, and then the evidence for it. Notice that the evidence picks up on the first party's evidence, but says, okay, if this is what you want, then you don't have to do it this way. We don't need space exploration for that purpose. In order to prepare for the evaluation of the answer choices, we mostly just need to understand the argument as I've summarized to this point, to understand, in this case, the response specifically to the first party. Notice that all of the choices start with verbs. Sometimes we can use those to even rule out answers. The verb doesn't sound right, it's too strong or too weak, or it doesn't really reflect what's exactly happening. We might say that with choice B, let's say suggesting. Seems like Winona is doing something stronger than that. But we do need to read more of the choices, and I'll point to the right answer, but it's helpful to note some of the characteristics of wrong answers. I think of choice C in particular, especially because it brings out the word contradict. When you see the word contradict or a similar word inconsistent on the LSAT, alarm bells should be going off. Stay away. Most of the time, that's not the answer, because it's very difficult to actually be self-contradictory in an argument. Arguments can be flawed or mistaken in all sorts of ways, but actually contradicting oneself doesn't happen that often on the LSAT. Choice D talks about achieving something at great expense. That is kind of a tempting choice because Winona does talk about funding, but it's not the heart of what she's getting at. She's kind of coming at this alternative. If this is what you want, if technological advances are what you want, then let's do it this way instead. Choice A says there's no evidence for what Inez is saying. That's probably too strong. That's not the way that Winona's coming at the argument. And so we've said something about all of the answers except E. Claiming, that's a good word. She certainly is claiming. And then she talks about that goal that's mentioned, but it can be pursued without the programs suggested. That fits well because Winona is saying, let's do this another way. Notice how important it is that we understand Winona's response, not just conclusion, but also supporting premises, that she's picking up on Inez's goal, but suggesting an alternative way to get there. One final note on technique questions. Like flaw questions, they describe in the answer choices what is happening. And anytime the answer choice's main goal is simply to describe how an argument functions, we want to avoid answers that are too extreme, too bold, as I like to say. We want to stick with more modest answers that have qualified language in most cases. And even in that sense, choice E passes that test with the word could. If it said must be, that might be too strong, but the word could is appropriately modest. So take this approach to technique questions and see how you do. Check back here for other videos and let us know how we can help you with the LSAT.